Hello. Today's seminar is 5 proven display changes you should make immediately. The thought behind this seminar when I put it together was to simplify the process of determining how to best display the merchandise in your showcase to take advantage of people's buying habits and to help you get where you want to go in your store. Let me begin by introducing myself. I'm Larry Johnson, the owner of Larry Johnson Consulting. I write frequently for In-Store Magazine. I'm the author of The Complete Guide to Effective Jewelry Display, a hardback book that is the textbook that GIA uses in their visual merchandising classes. For many years, I sold jewelry displays as the CEO of Chip and Hook and working for firms like Presentation Box and Pacific Northern. Now I have a consulting company that assists retail jewelers maximize the results of their visual merchandising. I visit stores for 1 to 3 days, help the jeweler in everything from a complete remodel to simply updating and rearranging their existing displays. We do training in visual merchandising techniques, and we do everything on site and then do normal follow-ups over a year period following the visit. The cost for this process runs between $9.95 and $34.50 depending upon what services you want us to provide, and there is a 100% guarantee of satisfaction. We do an awfully lot of work for our friends in IJO. These are some stores that we've done over the last few years and clients that we have within IJO. As part of that process, and something we're certainly offering to you, if you have particular problems with your displays or have questions about how to best display some things, we meet with you or talk to you by telephone, and I'm more than willing to give you half an hour, 45 minutes of discussion with no obligation and no price to simply offer my suggestions on how you can improve the success of your store through better visual merchandising. You can contact me through my email address, Larry Johnson Consulting, or by phone at the number listed on this slide at the bottom. I include an awfully lot of hints and ideas on my website, LarryJohnsonConsulting.com, and in addition, there are downloads that are available on that that have different articles, different ideas for trim, suggestions on showcases and fabrics and colors and things of that nature, all of which are available for free on the Larry Johnson Consulting website. So let's get started. I want to cover a few basic points that I think you need to know before we get into the 5 specifics of changes that I think you want to consider in your showcase. First and foremost, one of the most important things is to have intention. I want you to be thinking about everything you do in your store as having a specific goal or a measurable reason in mind as to why you're doing it. And there has to be some approach, some way in which we can track the results. Simply doing something in your store and then deciding if you like it or not is not sufficient. I think nowadays with the advent of things like the Edge software and other software packages, we can physically track the results of changes we make in the store. Are we selling more pearls as a result of the way we change the pearl display? Is this window bringing in more customers or not the way that we've done it? And I think it's very important that we track the results of that by running an Edge report, and my favorite, and I'll mention it again shortly, is the inventory performance by category report, tracking what the sales are of, let's say, bridal engagement rings, and then making our changes and then tracking what the results are after that. And I think by having intention, by planning and having a goal in mind, we can improve the success of our store. It begins by asking, where do you want to be? Where do you want your store to be 2 years from now? Do you want to be doing more bridal sales, more fine jewelry, custom, silver, repairs, branded, store brand? Do you want to expand to multiple locations, or do you want to sell the store and move to the beach? Make a decision, sit down and talk to your partners with the store and have some kind of a plan of how would you envision your store looking and being and the nature of the business being 2 years from now. If it's hard for you to do that, and I recognize that it's not an easy thing, let's imagine this scenario. Let's imagine that the store burns to the ground, God forbid. And the next day, Jewelers Mutual or someone shows up with an insurance check and pays you for all the inventory you have, the showcases, and your location. At that point in time, you have the opportunity, if you were deciding that you wanted to rebuild, you have the opportunity to say, what do I want the store to look like? Do I want these kind of cases again? Do I want the same merchandise I have? Would you go out and buy every single piece of merchandise that you had in the store up to this point? The answer is probably not. There's merchandise you wouldn't rebuy. There are aspects of the way the store is laid out that you might change when you rebuilt this store. So sitting down and thinking what that dream store might be if you were forced to rebuild from the ground up allows us to establish that as our target goal. Luckily, that store's not burned down and we're at a certain level. That dream store happens to be a higher level, and getting from where we are to that new higher level is where we apply intention. So where do you want to go? Let's take this analogy that you're currently doing $1 million worth of merchandise sales a year and you want to grow to $1.5 million. I ask you to think about, what does a $1.5 million store look like? What kind of merchandise does it have? What kind of staffing does it have? What's the presentation different? How is it different in a $1.5 million store than a $1 million store? It's very different. What about the sales support? What about systems? What about the shop? What does a $1.5 million store look like, and how do we get there from here? We develop a plan, and obviously that's part of what we do in our consulting business. Now, how do we get there? Well, we need to look like the store we want to become, market like the store we want to become, have a staff that's trained like the store we want to become, have a merchandise selection that's like the store we want to become, and act like we're a $1.5 million store, and soon we'll be that. So back to the main point, have intention, do everything you do in your store with a specific goal in mind or a measurable reason in mind, then do it, track the results, and revise it. So let's talk about a few old habits that I find many jewelers fall into and that probably need to change. We need to stop thinking like a retailer for a few hours and think like our customer thinks. I run into an awfully lot of stores where it's obviously laid out in the mindset of how the jeweler thinks instead of how someone shops. And we're going to get into that into some greater detail here in a moment. Let's stop ignoring critical data that we have and that we've paid for that would make our store more successful. Again, the advent of the software like the Edge allows us a great deal of information, almost too much sometimes, about all of the detail operations of the store. It's telling us in great detail just exactly how our store is doing. I think we need to not ignore that, and we need to spend some time applying it to changes we want to make going forward. Thirdly, I think we want to stop waiting on a white knight to ride in on a unicorn and buy some of the old inventory that we have. And we'll get into that and offer some suggestions on how you might be able to reduce that as part of this presentation. And stop setting up your store displays by the seat of your pants when you can learn the right way to do it that does increase your sales and helps your store be more successful. So people come to this point and how do I do this? How do I approach it? My God, it sounds like such a major overhaul of my entire store. We start and we just do it one bite at a time. And the bites that I prefer to go with is to sit down and analyze to make each case responsible for contributing its own share of the sales. So we need to allocate the space inside your store for the growth that you want. And I start that by trying to determine sales and profit targets per running foot of showcase. A lot of stores will tell me I've got 4,000 square feet or I've got 2,000 square feet of selling space. I prefer to ask, how many running feet of showcase space do you have? Because that's really where the business occurs, and that's what we have to work with. How many square feet of showroom you have is less important to me than how much actual selling space do we have? So first, I like to determine that. So you can do that quite simply by taking the total merchandise sales that you had for a 12-month period, and that should not include repairs or appraisals or not even really custom orders. Then take the total number of running feet of showcases in the store. You have 6 10-foot cases, that would be 60 feet, obviously. And divide your sales by the feet for the number of feet for an average of so many dollars per foot. So $750,000 worth of sales, 75 feet a case, it's $10,000 per foot. We're currently doing, in this example, $10,000 in sales for every 12 inches of showcase space we have. So if we want to grow 20% in our sales, we need to make each showcase foot of case deliver $12,000 per foot. But before we get into those aspirations, let's look at gross margin. The JA National Average says the gross margin in retail jewelry stores runs about 50%. So if we're doing $10,000 in sales per foot at a 50% gross margin, we need to make $5,000, of gross margin per foot of showcase. That $5,000 worth of per running foot of case is an average for the overall store. Obviously, we're going to do more in a bridal case than we might do in a silver case, but overall we have to average that amount of profit of gross margin per foot of case. So now let's analyze the showcase space based upon your goals. Take a moment, and if you're, for example, if you're devoting 6 feet of showcase to pearls, one question would be, are they carrying their weight? Is the amount of sales and profit being generated by that 6 feet of pearls carrying its weight and helping elevate your overall sales per foot? How about watches? How about color or men's? Remember that if we increase the sales by 20% per foot of case, ultimately we'll increase the store sales by 20%. So I direct your attention to this Edge Inventory Performance Report by category. It's a fantastic document that I think makes the cost of Edge well worth it in the operation of the store. Whenever I do a consultation meeting, I get this Edge Inventory Performance by category report or a similar report run by one of the other software firms, and I analyze it before I go into the store because it tells me how old the inventory is, what is selling. It tells me how much merchandise we have, what the profit margin is, and it allows me to come up with, before I even see the store, what is my expectation of how we might make that store grow. I urge you to look into this report, ask Edge or ask your consultants to help you understand it better and use it every week in determining the future and direction of your store. I use the sales data to decide what's selling now, what do we want to improve. I meet with the owners of the store in my consultation practice. What are the price points that are the most popular? Where do you want to go? Where are we missing some opportunities? Which categories are behind? And then I urge them to be merciless in making decisions about the store based upon the facts. We can believe that ultimately these pieces are going to sell or that pearls will come around, but at some point the facts are the facts, and we need to keep that as part of our goal in mind. The goal ultimately is to have a store in which your space is allocated in accordance with where you want your store to go from both a sales and a profit perspective. Have a store in which your space is allocated in accordance with where you want to go, both from a sales and a profit perspective. So let's get into the specific 5 things I'm suggesting to you. Idea number 1 is stop selling and start solving your customer's reason for being in your store. When someone walks into your store, they have a need. They have an objective for coming into your store that day. We tend to start giving them pat answers instead of listening intently to what our customer is telling us. So during that moment, You want to be on the same side of the issue with your customer and be trying to come up with a way to help them solve their problem that brought them into the store. Let's say, for example, the customer needs a gift for someone, or wants to treat themselves to a piece, or they're in a bit of a jam and they need to get out of the doghouse, or they want something but they don't know what it is, or they want something and they just can't afford it. You and your store have to have the solution to their problem, and you need to be prepared in advance with a good solution and be able to communicate it effectively. At the end of the day, the challenge is very simple. Buying jewelry is not a singular decision. It's a decision that's based on a comparison. If you don't have the engagement ring that Bob and Mary want to buy, it doesn't mean they're going to call off the wedding. It means they're not going to buy the ring from you. So every jewelry purchase is comparative. It's comparative between you and your competitor store or online. It's comparative once they start looking at rings. Do I want this ring or that ring? Do I want to spend this much money or that much money? And what is my perceived value of this item versus that item? Does it look like it's worth it to me? Is this a good value? I contend that if you control this comparison, you control the sale. And if you can't control the comparison, or you lose that comparison, then you lose the sale. Because remember, making a purchase is a process. The customer walks into your store and they see the entire store worth of merchandise. It's a bit overwhelming, particularly for your male customers. They have to go from that entire store of merchandise to the part of the store that has the solution to their problem, to the showcase that they see that they want, to the section of that showcase, to the tray, from that tray down to the item. And they have to end up with one item. If you cannot get the customer to select just one piece from your entire store selection, you do not make the sale. So for example, if they get down to 3 rings and can't decide which one they want, they'll walk out the door. They certainly very, very, very rarely would buy all 3. So I contend that selling jewelry is more about determining what they don't want than what they do want, and then making certain that what we talk to them about is that this is the solution to the challenge they had when they walked in the door. So to make that better and make it more efficient, I try to organize the cases by how customers shop. Starting with, I don't organize merchandise by unknown vendor names. Let's take hypothetically the Larry Johnson collection of rings. If you're buying this fictitious line of jewelry and you have it in your showcase, and someone comes in and you're using the Larry Johnson display, you're putting yourself in a situation for a smart buyer to turn around and say, well, what is the Larry Johnson collection? And too often I'll go into a store and they'll say, well, it's just one of the lines we carry, which is certainly not a very romantic approach to describing a line. I prefer not to utilize vendor names in the store unless that name is a name that people come in the door asking for. Certainly a Rolex or a Mikimoto or a Breitling or perhaps the Gabriel line or a few others. But right now we're swamped with all these vendor displays, which are not very efficient displays and don't follow some of the display principles we'll be talking about here pretty soon. And independent jewelers tend to use them because they're free and they're new, and all of a sudden the store starts having vendor displays that are out of size with what their contribution is, and the store is a combination of lots of different colors and looks disorganized. So I suggest that we stop automatically using inefficient vendor-provided displays just because they're free. If that display is 18 inches wide and we go back to our sales per running foot of showcase, are we making enough gross profit off of that line if we turn it one time a year, hypothetically? Are we making enough profit to warrant giving that line 18 inches worth of our space? So all too often we're not. So I like to organize, in addition, I like to organize our showcase categories by the first question that your sales staff asks, which is typically what style or stone shape or the date needed in the case of bridal. So I want to organize the showcases to match the sales presentation. Let me tell you that organizing your merchandise, the way you display your merchandise, goes a long way towards helping you accomplish this in your store. So I usually begin with platforms. And let me mention, when it comes to strategy, getting it all in the showcase is not a sales strategy. In fact, it's a recipe for stagnant or declining sales growth. People that are in shopping your store have to be able to see everything, and it has to be presented in a nice presentation, not simply just mass inside the store. I no longer offer or recommend linear platforms, because when we originally were selling these platforms 10 or 15 years ago, they were designed, and the sales presentation for them involved your customer's eye will flow through the showcase. Well, we learned after some work that we did with one of the chain stores, in which we videotaped people's eyes looking at the showcase, that people's eyes were flowing through the showcase far too quickly. They were actually flowing right through and out the other side without seeing the merchandise. So we determined that vignette platforms like these are a more efficient design, because it holds the vision in one rectangular space in which we've grouped merchandise together that has some reason for all being collected together. So in my display practice, and in many of the new layouts that are done in more modern stores, we've moved away from those flowing displays to a use of vignettes. And I prefer vignettes for that purpose. One other advantage to using them is we load them on baker's carts and load them right into the safe, which expedites getting us out of the store at night. Now, I always put each group of merchandise on its own vignette. So in colored stones, for example, I would have all the blue toned stones on one platform, all the reds on another, the greens on another, because in our research, we've learned that women, when they shop for colored stones, may go in looking for a sapphire, but it's actually blue that they're looking for to match their ensembles in their wardrobe that are blue, and they might well buy a tanzanite or a blue topaz instead of a sapphire. So we need to have all of those blue cast stones on one platform to make it easy for us to move the customer along. Let me also tell you that this arrow on the left shows the sweet spot on a vignette. That sweet spot is where everyone's eyes first go. So that pendant that's on the neck form there is the piece we want most to sell out of that vignette, because that's where the person's eyes go first. And knowing how people look at things in the showcase helps us organize it in a way that more people see it, and therefore improve our sales. Now, one of the ways in which that works against us, however, is when we have old inventory. It's important that we move out the old dogs out of the showcase, because research tells us that merchandise that's still in the showcase after a year has a 90% chance of still being there in 5 years. So I tend to think of it the way you think of fruit. How often does your customer visit your store? If you are in a tourist area, Key West or Las Vegas, or someplace where your customer is in one time and maybe never back again, that customer, you might have a better chance of finding someone who would buy some old ring you've had for 5 years. But when you're in a store that has a recurring customer base, and you have the same clientele coming in every 2 or 3 months to buy something, and they've seen that same ring over and over again, I think it's a fallacy for us to believe that Mrs. Jones has walked by that ring 3 times a year for 5 years, and all of a sudden she's going to walk in one day and have an epiphany that, oh my goodness, I've got to have this ring. Old merchandise is like old bananas, and thinking that someday someone might come in wanting this is a recipe for disaster. But it actually makes our situation more difficult. Let me give you an example of a dress shop. If a brand new dress shop opened up in your town and it was a brand you'd never heard of, and a woman goes in to check that dress shop out, and they have 200 or 300 dresses in the store, how many dresses does she look at before she makes a decision about that store? Well, national research, and quite frankly, me asking that question in dozens of seminars I've given, really shocked me. The average woman will look at 4 to 6 dresses before she makes a decision as to whether or not this kind of dress shop is for her. 4 to 6 out of hundreds. So wait for a moment. If as retailers, if we only have 4 to 6 shots at getting their attention, why are we wasting so many of those shots on items that have been proven to be unpopular? We have old inventory in our showcases. That's being counted as one of our 4 to 6 shots. And we've established, our customers have told us loud and clear that that merchandise is unpopular. So don't kid yourself. If you've had it that long, it's not going to sell. So what I try to recommend is this. First, let's take everything out of the showcase that's over either 12 or maybe 18 months old. Let's put it in the vault in trays that you can access if necessary, and let's get it cleaned up before we put it in there. Let's organize the remaining merchandise in your case into logical groups in accordance with the discussion that we're having today. And then let's test and track and adjust our arrangement as needed. And then if we find we're selling more by showing less, then we can move out the old stock when the decision is made. Let me tell you that cleaning out your showcases and tracking the results means that your case becomes full of proven winners. It frees up cash for more productive things. For goodness sake, you want to reorder what sells and sell it again. Fast sellers are a godsend, and you want to reorder them until every lady in town has that pendant. And you make your customers see your store as a dynamic place where new things are coming in all the time instead of a staid, old, dusty spot that has the same old inventory that I've seen all along. Now, I mentioned that I write for In-Store Magazine, and Eileen McClellan of In-Store has written several great articles about how to get rid of old inventory in your store, and that's assuming that you've gone past the stock balancing and your vendor doesn't have some methodology for you switching the merchandise out. You can download Eileen's recent article on getting rid of old inventory off my website, and it might offer you some suggestions. Idea number two, organize your displays with intention and logic to make your goods look like a better value and shopping for them easier for your customers. Let me ask you this question. Looking at this display, what piece of merchandise do you want most to sell? Well, it may be that you want to sell the one that's the highest price or has the most profit, or the ugliest piece, or the one you're most tired of looking at. Maybe it's been here since Reagan was president. Well, whatever the piece is that you want most to sell, you want to determine what that is in every single showcase, and then let's feature it. The customer should not have to pull a Waldo and have to search around your showcase to find the nicer pieces, and it's in your best interest if they don't have to search, and it's easy to see the piece that if you had your choice, you'd have them buy. Now realize that displaying it has to match what you're going to say about it. It's kind of hard to talk about quality when I display something in a showcase that looks like this, where essentially we've emptied out the vault and put everything in this case in some haphazard method, expecting people to fall in love with the pieces we show. So let's try this experiment when you get back into your store. Pretend for a moment that someone walks in the store and drops down their credit card and says, I'll buy anything in this showcase. Which piece do you want me to buy? And they say that to one of your sales staff. Well, my recommendation is that we want to make the best pieces in your case stand out. So in an example like these vignettes that you see, it would be the pieces in the back center on the right platform there. It would be those 3 rings that are on the dark brown elements. Those are the pieces we want most to buy. And notice in this, we have some of the merchandise on individual elements, some in trays that hold 2 or 3, and one tray there on the right that holds 5. There's a reason for that, and that reason is summarized in my 20-40-40 rule. And I suggest you consider trying this for a 60-day period. And essentially, it's a best, better, great type of an arrangement. How do we implement that? It's really very simple. We take the top 20% of the merchandise in that particular vignette. Those are the best items you have on that vignette to offer. And we put that on individual elements. They go on individual elements because they're the best and they deserve to be shown individually. We then drop down to the next 40% of merchandise. That's the mid-priced or better is what we would call it. And that goes on low density trays of 3 to 5 pieces. And that goes in the center part of the platform. Then the lowest 40%, that would go on trays of 7 to 9 to show more selection. That's an important word. The adjectives that we use in our sales presentation matters. Go back to this example of this platform we were looking at that has the 3 dark brown elements in the back center, the platform on the right. A customer comes in and they're looking for this category of merchandise, and I believe these may be having a hard time seeing the color, but it may be red for rubies. If someone's looking for a ruby ring, I would open up that showcase and I would get one of those 3 dark brown elements and present that first. That's the piece I want most to sell off of that platform. If I run into resistance where the customer is a little concerned about the price and I'm out of their price range, instead of me saying to them, come on, let's walk down here to my cheaper case, I simply go back into this platform, put them back, and stick my arm further into the case to one of those trays that holds 2 or 3 there in the center of the showcase. If I run into price resistance there as well, I go all the way into the front of the showcase, closest to the customer, to that tray of 5. And when I get to there, I'm no longer talking about exclusivity and uniqueness and one of a kind, adjectives that I might use when I'm selling one of the best items in the back. Here I'm selling based on selection, that here at Johnson's Jewelers, we have a broad selection of rings in that lower price point. The lower price point being what's on that tray of 5. People often who are working on a tighter budget may not always have a lot to choose from. So by us talking to them about the broad selection we have at the low price point, we're appealing to their buying motivations. Whereas the doctor who comes in shopping for a $10,000 colored stone ring may be used to lots of choices in their lives, and there what we're really talking about are utilizing adjectives that focus on uniqueness, handmade, one of a kind, very special, and selection is not as critical. Moving beyond, here's what our showcase ends up looking like if we organize it that way. The pieces that we want most to sell are on the dark brown, and we have the higher capacity trays near the very front. And once someone understands how the showcase works, it's easier for them to shop the store, just the same as once you know how a particular website works, it's easier for you to navigate through that website. Let's look at idea number 3. Let's organize our cases by how real people actually shop. And let's start with using your bridal cases as an example. How easy is it for a customer who walks into your store to really work their way around and find what they're looking for? Customer comes in your store, they're looking for a halo. And I've been in stores where they say, oh, we have halos from ABC, XYZ, DEF. Those are in those cases, and those are from a designer that you've never heard. Those are over here, and our own halos are over here. These are the ones we bought off the street that are in our estate case. And if you don't see anything like that, I have 3,615 alloy halo pieces that I can show you. And if none of that works, we can make anything you want. We've basically told them that we've got halos all over the place, and finding the one that they're going to want becomes increasingly difficult. And it's particularly that way when you're dealing with millennials who think they have to see every single option before they make a decision. Instead, what I like to try to do is tailor the presentation to match the display, tailor the way the showcase is laid out to match how the sales presentation is going to happen. That allows us to say, welcome to our store. Our bridal area is over here. What style do you prefer? Halo. Those halos are, in this case, have a seat. What shape of diamond is your favorite? When do you want to give her the ring? Look at this one. It fits your criterion very easily. So like in that case, that photo that I showed a moment ago of the different platforms all in the case, that's a bridal layout for a client of mine in Georgia. We organize their bridal selection by ring style. We'll put all the halos on one platform or maybe two platforms together. We'll put the solitaires on another, maybe the sets or duos on a third, side stones on a fourth, and then we have some words that don't really have any definition, vintage or tradition or contemporary, to show the rest of the selection. Then when someone comes in and our sales associates say, what kind of a style do you have? And they say halos, we can go right to a particular platform and our entire selection is right there. It may be that we have to have a small tray with a alloy sample of a halo, a solitaire, side stone, traditional and contemporary if they're not sure. But in this day and age, typically what happens is the customer comes in and has a Pinterest photograph or a magazine ad or can describe for you what they're looking for. We make the selection easier because we've thought like the customer. We've stopped thinking like the retailer, and we're approaching it from the same mindset as the customer. So by organizing this platforms by that style, we end up making it easier for the customer to find what they're looking for. For goodness sake, we want to utilize the best displays you have in this case. And if you're on a tight budget and your displays are starting to look a little ratty, and it may be best to spend your money redoing the displays in your bridal case, those cases will generate the highest profit margins the fastest, and then we can set aside a portion of that new profit to give us the money to redo the other displays in the other cases. So we go through, I'm recommending to you to go through each case in your store, whether it's pearls, watches, men's, color, gold, whichever category, and ask yourself, is it organized to emphasize the pieces you want most to sell? And is it organized by how your customer shops? Think of it in the very same sense as the grocery store that sells corn chips, and right adjacent to it is the dip that goes with it, so you don't have to walk all over the store to get two items that you might purchase together. Ask yourself if your store is easy to shop and is arranged in such a way that it flows naturally for your customer. Again, you have to stop thinking like the owner of the store and start thinking like the people who walk in the door. As I mentioned before, colored stones are typically displayed in colored groups, putting your blues and reds and greens and yellows or all others on individual vignettes and arranging that in a good, better, best format. If you have difficulties doing this in your store, feel free to send me photographs and give me a phone call, and we'll talk about the different ways that we might be able to arrange it to make it easier for someone to shop. Idea number 4 is give your store some life, some interest, some dynamism, and make shopping at your store an enjoyable experience. I think it's important that we make your store look like the local destination for what's new in fine jewelry. Particularly, this is critical if one of your aspirations for where you want to be in the next 2 years is to sell more fashion jewelry or more diamond fashion jewelry. One great idea is to keep reminding customers that you have your own preferences within the store and that your selection is always changing and that your store is an organic, dynamic location where new merchandise is coming in and items are being sold out the front door every single day. I was visiting a shop with my wife in a mall not far from our home, and I saw this sign, a few of our favorite things, on the wall of a ladies' lingerie shop, and it gave them some examples of items in the store that were, in a sense, being recommended by the staff of the store. I took that idea and we applied it to a store in which we have a sign that says what's new. We list on there the new items that have come into the store. And when people come in and they see that there's a new peridot and amethyst necklace, it's for those people who are interested in what's new and what might be a new design. It gives our sales team an opportunity to take them right over and show it. Now, I would say this: if you utilize a sign like this and you sell the peridot and amethyst necklace, don't erase it. Draw a line through it. And that says, gee, I wish you'd been here yesterday. We still had it. We sold it yesterday, but let me show you a photograph of it. I can order another one. It gives the idea that it's in, but it may not be here forever if it gets sold if you don't move quickly. So applying this idea of the fact that your store is always changing, I think is a great idea. One other thing you may find, and this is a corrugated box I saw in a Costco that was selling a lady's scarf, and the slide's a little difficult to read. But on the side of the box, because there was no salesperson there to sell these scarves, there was examples on how to wear this scarf. You might see the scarf, but the owners of or the manufacturers of the scarf realize that if a woman doesn't know how to wear it, she's not going to buy it. So by seeing the side of the box that gave her 3 examples of how the scarf might be used as a fashion accessory, increased their chances of being able to sell it. My suggestion is there may be young women shopping in your store who, for whatever reason, never had an interest in or never learned fashion accessorizing and may not know how to best utilize pearls or where you can wear pearls to or gold jewelry. And you may need to have examples of how to wear them and have your sales staff trained in suggesting how different pieces in your store can be worn so the woman knows what she would do with it. One other thing I would suggest is the promotion of a monthly payment plan. Um, we're certainly not new at this, as all of the mall chain jewelry stores sell so much of their merchandise, somewhere above 60% of the merchandise sold in mall chain stores is sold because of the financing. So when we don't offer financing, when we simply say, well, we offer it, but we don't really promote it, we're giving a great deal of business we could be getting to the mall stores because they start off with offering the financing. So we've done these little signs that have worked very well in our cases in which we show that financing is available. But as you can see there, as I'm looking for a piece in here, it's easy for me to move from a $750 piece that might be $63 a month to a $1,000 piece at $84 a month. It seems like such a small incremental difference, and yet it increased our sales by 33%. So offering a sign like this, I think, is an excellent idea. I have these signs on my Larry Johnson Consulting website, and you can download them from there or create them for yourself and for the sign holder as well. This is a sign that's made by AGTA, and they're very effective. The back of the sign has the cheat sheet to tell you what to say about the citrine and how to sell the romance and aspects of the stone. And it's a nice 4-color image on the front. And again, AGTA offers these. I have a client that utilizes this type of signage in which he photographs couples that have bought their engagement rings at his store, runs them on his store monitor, as well as encounter cards like this that give the new bride who's coming in a sense that other people have been there and bought there. It's a recommendation, I think, that's stronger even than a Yelp rating. Obviously, I mentioned the store monitor. Turning your wall monitor into an effective sales tool is a little bit like hiring an outside salesperson for your store that says exactly what you want, is never sick, never late, never complains, for $99 a month. And recognize that retail has embraced video screens in a very big way, and virtually everywhere your customer goes, they're watching screens. So we've incorporated that in a business called mystoremonitor.com, in which we promote diamond sales, price points, brands, happy customers, all of this, and these images go straight onto your Facebook page as well. That's done by mystoremonitor.com at a price of $99 a month. You can contact us if you'd like more information on that. Number 5 is to use the human nature to increase your average sale. There is a wonderful book out there called Predictably Irrational by Dan Aurelier of Duke University. And one of the things that Dr. Aurelier does is he talks about how there are decisions people make that seem like they are unpredictable as to what someone would choose, but in fact they're very predictable. And I offer this one to you. In many cases, I've shown this to groups of attendees at my seminars and asked them to pick a number. And it's amazing to me, after asking someone to pick a number, that 80% of the people that you ask will pick the number 3. And the obvious next question is why? And I think we're hardwired in much of the same spirit as Goldilocks to not too hot, not too cold, just right. We pick something in the middle. McDonald's best-selling soft drink is not the large or the small, it's the medium. And we find that people gravitate towards those medium-priced items. So how does that apply in jewelry retail? Well, it's very simple. When you display things of a similar nature, like diamond ear studs, or crosses, or anniversary bands, diamond anniversary rings, for example, since they all look essentially the same, it is my recommendation that you always have the one that you want most to sell to be the third choice. You would not want the third choice of the item to be at a price point that you're already selling. If your average diamond ear stud sales is $1,000, make the number 3 choice $1,200 by offering a higher priced one at $16 or whatever. People are going to gravitate towards the displays in the middle. If you notice, if you have a tray like this from a vendor or whatever, quite often you've got a couple of pads that are missing in there. The pads are rarely the cheapest and rarely the most expensive. They're almost always, you've sold the ones that are in the middle, because that's human nature. So utilize that advantage by elevating the price point for the number 3rd choice to be where you want to go. I did a store up in the Chicago area one time, and they had a Your Choice display, a platform with Your Choice for $1,995. And next to it was a platform of Your Choice, $29.99. And the third platform was $49.99. And the fellow who owned the store asked me, "What do you think of this display?" And my standard answer is, "How's it working?" Because that's the only guideline that matters, is if it's pretty or not pretty doesn't really matter. What matters is it selling? And he said that he was selling a good number of the $29.99, but not as many $49.99 as he wanted. Well, I had just finished reading Dr. Aurelier's book, so I suggested we put together a platform of $79.99 items. We did, and his sales of $49.99 went up 30% in the next 3 months. So consequently, we elevated the price point that we wanted to sell more of to the number 3 choice instead of making it the highest choice. And it's not unlike what you experience when you go in a store or in a restaurant and the waiter talks to you about today's special. I can promise you, from my friends that own restaurants, I've learned that what he didn't tell you is that it's 10 to 20% higher than similar items. He makes a higher profit margin on it. It accounts for 30 to 40% of their sales. He uses different emotional and colorful adjectives when he describes that special to you. If you ask him for a recommendation, he'll always recommend the special. And just like wine, the more expensive bottle is always the choice he'll have. Very rarely do you have dinner in a restaurant, ask for a wine recommendation, and the bottle they recommend is the cheapest bottle on the menu. It just doesn't work that way. Well, how do we apply this logic to our stores? And here at a Lowe's, not far from my home, they have a deal of the day. This is a situation in which they're promoting a particular item that for that day is at a less expensive price. Well, we've incorporated that as a deal of the month in displays in different stores in which we'll take a piece of merchandise, in this case it's the necklace that's on the neck form, and we mark it down every Monday morning by a certain amount until it's gone. And it keeps dropping in price until someone decides they want to buy it. Another idea is to utilize more of a good, better, best approach. There is a great article in the Harvard Business Review from October of 2018 talking about the price differences between good, better, and best to make it more successful. Good is usually priced at about 20% cheaper than the better option, and better is about 30% below best. So if something you've been averaging, you're selling at about $900, if you set it up as a good, better, best option and have an $800, a $1,000, and a $1,470 price option, you increase your overall sales by elevating the one most people are going to buy, which is better, elevating that price point, and they found in their research that more people will move up to best than will drop down to good. So when you're setting up this kind of a program, make sure that it's easy for you to sell the ones that you want to sell at the price point that you want. And for example, on custom jobs, try to offer multiple options. Instead of coming back on a custom job and saying, hi, I can do what you ask, here's the design, it's $3,000. You should go ahead and say, however, if I add 2 more diamonds to it, here and here, we would end up doing it for, it would cost $3,600, or I can take this off and it would be $2,100. Something that gives people multiple choices and multiple options. One of the things that, again, thinking like a customer, I think people don't realize when they're setting up their showcases how uncomfortable they make some of their customers, and frankly put them in a position where they're not comfortable shopping in the store. Take this showcase for this platform, for example. See the hoop earrings at the very front of the case? The only way someone can actually see how those hoops look the way the designer intended is to bend over in the front of the case and look through the front glass. Nobody feels comfortable doing that. All of the merchandise on the platform needs to be visible down through the top of the showcase, not having to bend over and look through the front. That may very well mean that we need to slide the displays back further on the platform to make that happen. But you can also control that by using flat displays in closer to the customer, like the flat line you see at the bottom, and angled displays nearer the associate side of the showcase, so that both are aimed right at her eyes when she looks through the front of the case. So in a showcase like this, we're just avoiding putting things too close to the front of the case. It's all right for that front 3 or 4 inches to be empty. That's where we can put our signage and we can put our payment sign. Angle displays, as I said, go in the back. Flat displays, like these flat trays, go in the front. Those are my 5 points that I wanted to review, but I have a few minutes to give you some ideas, some bonus things that I'd like you to consider. The first of those is my top 10 gift idea strategy. You've often got a situation in which a person walks into the store and what brings you in? I'm looking for an anniversary gift for my wife. And the man's looking around the store and he's overwhelmed again. Remember our discussion about a comparative purchase. He sees this entire store. Well, we know that men come into a store to buy, women come into a store to shop. Women spend an average of 15 times as much time in a store as a man in a jewelry store. So we want to make that job easier for him. He has a challenge, an objective. Remember that part of our discussion from a few minutes ago. So we tell him that here at Johnson's Jewelers, we have 10 really great gift ideas. Let me show you those. So what we've done as part of that process is taken an entire store of selection and we've made his job simpler. We've solved his problem by going from 1,000 pieces of jewelry to 10. If you've pre-chosen 10 really great gift ideas for your clients ahead of time, and you've made sure that each item is replaceable and you price it at full margin because we're going to sell more. You identify each item in the case and you choose the items at all different price points from around the store. So something starts out at 100 and goes up to the most expensive non-bridal piece of merchandise in the store. Then we make sure the sales team is understanding the process and they're familiar with each item. If we then put the item in the case with a sign, and I like to use a small gift wrap box adjacent to it to make it easier to find. Here we have an example of great gift idea, a Levion diamond ring, $9.99 or $40 a month. It's on an individual element and there's a gift wrap box sitting next to it. We show that client the 10 gift ideas that we have. If he looks at this Levion ring and that's outside of his price point, at least if he likes the idea of a chocolate diamond ring, we're in the case where we can move over to another piece and sell him that one if this particular ring doesn't solve his purpose. I don't like to put all 10 gift ideas in one case because it makes it awkward if the particular one we show him isn't right for him for whatever reason. We'd have to take him over to the diamond stud display or whatever. I almost always incorporate a pair of diamond ear studs and a diamond anniversary band in these 10 gift ideas. Another area of making a display that matches what we're doing and giving value is in the areas of custom jewelry. I like to do a platform like this that has some old mallets. These were laying around the store, or you can buy them on eBay. There's some waxes, there's a few loose stones, and this, once we got the sign put in the front, this is before the sign was made, this particular platform is where we have the conversation about custom work because it gives a visual to the conversation with the customer about having something custom made. I don't think very many of our clients realize how much art and how much craftsmanship goes into making a custom piece for them. And by having these tools, we're able to show and tell when we're talking about the capabilities we have for doing custom work. And on the store monitor, we incorporate something like this type of an image to just show handmade and the whole concept behind the skill and talent that you have to make custom jewelry. Another thing I like to suggest in stores is using more emotional adjectives. I strongly recommend that my clients stay away from using the word pretty or the word beautiful. My recommendation is pretty and beautiful are kind of overused terms that I'll let the salespeople at the local mall chain store say, isn't this a pretty ring? I want the salespeople in our store to use more emotional adjectives. Isn't it a brilliant ring? Isn't it stunning? Doesn't it really sparkle? Isn't it bold or radiant? There are words, these happen to be adjectives that one of the TV shopping networks uses in their sales presentations that are more emotional. For example, if you look at a woman and say she looks pretty, that certainly is nice, or she looks beautiful. But if you say that she looks spectacular or looks stunning or fabulous, those adjectives carry more impact, more emotion. You'll see a different response. And those types of more emotional adjectives, when we apply them to the jewelry in our case, I think are more impactful. So separate your store. Remember I said it's a comparative situation between your store and another store. Separate your store by using adjectives in their sales presentation that are more emotional. Try to stay away from doing loose stones in a showcase like this. What's our intention? To show that we have a lot of loose stones, or are we really trying to sell them from here? My experience is that people begin to look at the price tags here and stop looking at the individual diamonds. I try to stay away from bridal displays that just show a bunch of rings. We're not separating it. Which one do you want me to buy? They're all presented equally. It's kind of a self-serve. It's the difference between going to a restaurant and going to a cafeteria. I prefer to direct the customer towards making the decision I want them to make instead of saying, here's all my rings. They're all in the same tray. They all look alike. same kind of tray. They all look alike. I don't care which one you buy. Let me know when you've decided and I'll ring it up. I certainly don't like to line up merchandise in boxes. Again, we're just putting it in the case. Here's what I've got to offer without any imagination and without any direction towards what you want me to buy. And people, when they're looking at jewelry lined up like this, start looking at the first one and the second one and the third one. But by the seventh one, they speed up and their eye is moving more quickly and they don't even look at them anymore. You can't display quality items like they're laying in a storage tray and expect people to believe the quality and craftsmanship story that your sales presentation might involve. Make certain this necklace looks like it's trying to escape here. Make sure that your elements match the piece that you're offering. This type of a necklace either needs to be collected in the back or needs to be on a very tall neck that shows it, not hanging out over the front edge of the window box. Try not to overload your displays. I can tell you that to set that up every morning takes an inordinate amount of time. And if I walk into the store and say I want to see the chain that's halfway down there, your sales associate is going to be hesitant to pull it out because she knows it's going to take her 30 minutes to get it back on there and get everything looking right. You're minimizing the value of the goods when you show this. This isn't a selection. This is a debasement of the value of the merchandise. Makes color mean something in your store. Look here, we have brown elements, white elements, gray elements. People are used to color meaning something in a store. If I have a pink ribbon on my lapel, it means I'm cognizant of breast cancer. Color needs to mean something in the store. Remember the showcase that we had that had the dark brown elements? It meant these are the nicest pieces. Here this means I went to the back, I got a neck form, and the neck form I got, only one I could find was gray, so it goes in the case. Again, what are we communicating here? It's just a mass presentation with items missing and pads that are empty. It doesn't show any intention and it certainly doesn't communicate value. I suggest that you use vendor provided displays if it's a brand of jewelry your customer asks for by name, if it meets your guidelines about the size and sales profit potential of its size, and if it communicates some selling point that you can't duplicate on your own. Vendor displays for the dancing diamond type product that move in order to show the diamond's movement. I understand the need there because it communicates a benefit of the merchandise. But if the display is not required to show some selling point, I'm thinking we don't use it. Free doesn't always mean it's a good idea. What about the size? What about the color? Does it promote your brand or their brand? And what do they add? What does it add to make your sale easier? So I suggest that you don't use it if your brand is what's bringing them into the store. If you have to spend too much time explaining who Larry Johnson is, that's the designer, if it's too big or the wrong color, or if it makes your own store goods look less than. I strongly suggest you check out your lighting. LEDs are obviously the best option for lighting applications, but they have to be installed correctly. LEDs should not be more than 8 to 10 feet above the floor, and they must be aimed correctly. Notice here how the lights are shining on the front edges of those neck forms, and the shadow is actually occurring over the neck form itself. One of the easiest ways to change the look of your store is to change out your floorboards. You can do that for about $30 to $50 a case, but it gives the showcase a whole new look. I suggest you use a slightly different color than your displays. I would suggest you use Charisma Suede, which is available from display companies for $40 a yard. And be careful when using fabric store fabric, because the fabric may have a sulfur dioxide content to it that'll tarnish the jewelry. When you're ready to clean your displays, I suggest you use a product called Simple Green. Use it diluted 50-50 with water. Spray it onto your displays. Let it sit for about 15 or 30 seconds. and do its job, and then wipe it off gently with a damp cloth. Do not scrub your displays. They have a varnish coating on the top of the leatherette, and if you scrub through that leatherette, that varnish, the leatherette underneath is actually a slightly different color. It's a little bit like scraping the varnish off a wooden desk. The wood underneath is a different shade. So let the simple green clean them. It'll clean everything except ballpoint pen ink. Ballpoint pen ink is designed to adhere to everything, and it's very almost impossible to get off. If you think your staff was born with good merchandising techniques, then I'd like to meet them, because I've never found anyone who automatically had that talent since birth. I would suggest they do some work in studying visual merchandising and understanding that it's a science, and they can get some of that from my book, or there are obviously visual merchandising classes at the local fashion colleges. There's visual merchandising books on eBay. They can attend seminars like this. But what's most important is for them to learn to determine whether a display is effective by the sales numbers and not by whether it looks pretty. Obviously, I have copies of my book. Here's one on eBay for $115. I was selling them at, I'll sell them copies I have for $20 plus the shipping cost. Listen, thanks very much for your time today. I know you are busy, and I'm hoping that something out of this display seminar has proven to be helpful for you. Feel free to give me a telephone call at this number, or visit me at one of the upcoming IJO or Southern Jewelers Travelers Association show in Atlanta, or feel free to give me a telephone call, send me an email at Larry Johnson Consulting. Let me know if I can help you in any way. Thanks very much for your time. Have a good day.